Hello, and welcome to our latest instalment of our Buying for Beginner series. This time, we're focusing on the Wood Elves of Athol Loren. And like all our other Buying for Beginner videos, we'll be focusing on 3 competitive army lists and explaining the best value for money options for the units in each of those lists. Now, much of the Wood Elf range is unfortunately no longer produced by Games Workshop. All of the Tree Spirit units are still produced, or very good alternatives for them, as are Eagles, although they're not specifically Wood Elf Eagles, and in fact, not even Fantasy Eagles. But Games Workshop still produce the Sisters of the Thorn and Wild Rider kit as well, and the Eternal Guard / Wildwood Ranger kit, along with a single elf character who is Araloth. Now, this isn't as bad as some Warhammer armies, but it isn't really enough to make a competitive Wood Elf army. And so we are going to have to look at some third-party alternatives. Now though, on to the main event. I'm going to go through some competitive lists and take you through exactly what you need to buy for each unit or character and give you the best cost I could find for each of them. The first list is going to be a 1,500 points, the second will be 2,000, and the final one will be a Triple Crown Wargaming event standard 2,500 point list. In each one, I'll try to keep as many of the units and characters the same, so you can slowly build up your Wood Elf force and not end up with units sitting in a case gathering dust by the end of it. So, the 1,500 point list then that I've got with me today consists of a level 4 Spellweaver on the lore of Dark Magic, mounted on an Elven Steed, with a Dispel scroll and the Talisman of Endurance. A level 2 Spellsinger on the lore of Fire, also mounted on an Elven Steed, with the Obsidian Amulet. Now, you could go for a different lore on this wizard, but I think Lore of Fire really helps with chaff clearance, and it's all pretty low cost, which is good for a level 2. Metal is another good lore for Wood Elves, but the signature can be quite difficult to cast on level 2, so it tends to require more dice, and that draws it away from your level 4. Anyway, back to the list, and we're into core now, so this is going to be 2 units of 12 Glade Guard. Both have musicians and standard bearers, and both are armed with Trueflight arrows. Now, you could swap these out for Hagbane tips to give your archers poison shots, and it really is personal choice. With the possibility of +1 to wound from the Lore of Fire, though, I would recommend sticking with Trueflights, at least for one of the units. For special, I have a unit of 5 Sisters of the Thorn with full command and the Gleaming Pennant, and 2 units of Wild Riders. Now, one is a unit of 6 and one is a unit of 7. Both have champions and shields. Finally, in rare, I have 2 Grey Eagles, and that comes out at 1,499 points. Now, at this point, I'd usually start with the characters, but this time I'm actually going to start with the core, and you'll see why a bit later. So, for that core, we need 24 Glade Guard. These, unfortunately, aren't a unit Games Workshop still produces, and so we're going to be heading straight for those third-party alternatives. And the alternatives that I think work best are the Oathmark Elf Light Infantry. You get 30 in a box, and you can either make them with sword and shield or bows. Obviously, we're going to be wanting the bows for this list. You also get enough command options to make a champion and a standard bearer per 5 models, so you definitely get enough flags in there. The only issue is musicians, as the kit doesn't come with any. If you have spare horns and things from other armies, then great. If not, then I'd suggest looking on bit sites for the horn from the Eternal Guard / Wildwood Ranger kit, or using the horn from the Sisters of the Thorn / Wild Rider kit that we'll be using for some of the other units in this list. Not all common independent stock is stock Oathmark products, but I did find it from Firestorm Games for £22.50, which is £2.50 off the RRP. And if you can source those horns or other musical instruments, then that's all you'll need for your core. On to special then, and our first unit are the Sisters of the Thorn. Now, Games Workshop do still produce these, and they are £30 for a box of 5. They are direct only, so you're unlikely to find them discounted from any third parties, and I couldn't when I looked. You'll need 3 more of the same kit to make the 2 units of Wild Riders for this list too, bringing the total for those 3 units up to £120. Now, that's a lot for 18 models. You will have 2 left over from the 4 kits, and so this is how I would create the 2 mounted wizards that you need for this list. I'd build them as Sisters of the Thorn with, some very simple conversions, like using the Sisters unit champion staff head on both ends of one of their staffs, for instance. Or if you can find something else in your bits box that you like the look of, then replacing that staff head entirely. I think this, with a slightly different paint scheme, will make those models easily stand out as characters. And it won't cost you any more money, which is always a plus. Finally then, for this first list, we have the 2 Great Eagles. Now, as I said at the start of this video, Games Workshop do still produce Eagles. They're not Wood Elf Eagles, they're not even Warhammer Eagles. But what I would use for these are the Middle-earth Great Eagles. These are £30 a pair from Games Workshop, but you'll get a slight discount at Boards and Swords, which brings the price down to £27. Not bad then. And that wraps up the first list. And we're up to a total of £169.50 if you go with those Oathmark Light Elves from Firestorm and the Great Eagles from Boards and Swords. That does include 6 spare Glade Guard, so there is some room for change in the list without it costing any more. Next, I'm going to move on to the 2000 point list. This, again, contains a level 4 Spellweaver on the Lore of Dark Magic, mounted on an Elven Steed with a Dispel scroll, and this time she's upgraded to the Talisman of Preservation. Next up, we have the same level 2 Spellsinger on the Lore of Fire, mounted on an Elven Steed with the Obsidian Amulet, and this time she's also got the Power Stone. Now, I also have a Glade Captain BSB with the Howl of Doom Arrow, the Enchanted Shield, and Trueflight arrows. The core is very similar to the first list, with 3 units this time of 10 Glade Guard, all with Trueflight arrows. All of the units have musicians, and 2 also have standards. In special, I have a larger unit of Sisters of the Thorn, 8 this time, and they still have their full command with the Gleaming Pennant. I've upped the smaller unit of Wild Riders to 7, so I now have 2 7-man units. Both have shields and champions, and both also have standard bearers now. I also have a unit of 6 Deepwood Scouts with Starfire shafts. Now, again, arrow choice here really is down to you and what you prefer. I think this type of unit should only really ever have Starfire or Moonfire, and it really just depends what you usually fight or what you're expecting to fight. If you're building an all-round competitive list, then I think Starfire is the way to go, as more often, units from the Forces of Destruction have regen, so you'll get more use out of the +1 to wound on units which you want to hit with a flaming. But, like I said, it really is up to you. Finally, in rare, I have those same 2 Great Eagles. So, what do you need to add to this list over the first? Well, you get all the archers you need for your core from the 1 box of Oathmark Elves you've already bought. Although, you will need some scouts on top of that, so I'd suggest another box. Now, that might seem like a lot for just 6 more archers, but having those extra really will pay dividends when we get to our final list, or in giving you the ability to mix up the list a lot at 2000 points. You'll also need another box of Sisters of the Thorn to up that unit from 5 to 8, and that will also give you the additional Wild Rider you need to up the second unit from 6 to 7. The only other new addition is that Glade Captain BSB. First though, onto those extra archers. Now, as we discussed before, the Oathmark Light Elf Infantry box is £22.50 from Firestorm Games, and I absolutely would recommend getting another 30-man box, even though for this list you only actually need 6 models more than you've already got. That will give you 24 spare archers, which you can use to really vary what you take at 2000 points. Maybe you want to go heavier on the core archers, or maybe you want to drop some Sisters or Wild Riders and get more scouts in, or even Weight Watchers. With those spare models, you have a lot of options. Additionally, it means if and when you do up the points of the army from 2000 to 2500, you probably won't need to buy another box, as you'll have all the archers you'll need, so it will save you in the long run. The additional box of Sisters of the Thorn / Wild Riders that you'll need will add another £30 to the total, and will leave you with 1 spare. Now, I would recommend not building this extra one until you decide what you want to use it as. There's not much worse than building it as a sister only to actually want an additional Wild Rider. The first new addition then for this list is the Glade Captain BSB. Now, Games Workshop don't produce a generic Glade Captain model anymore. However, they do produce what is now called a Nomad Prince in their Cities of Sigmar range for Age of Sigmar. However, any long-time lords and ladies of Athol Loren will know this guy to be Araloth. Although you won't be using him as the model he was originally intended to be, he does make a pretty good BSB with a quick swap of the top of his spear for a banner. And you have a couple of options for the type of banner to use. You could use one of the spare Oathmark Elf banners you have, but the one I would recommend using would be a spare Sisters of Thorn banner. Replace the top of his spear with that, and he'll make a perfect BSB. And he's only £15 direct from GW. And that's all you need to up the 1500 point list to a 2000 point list. With those additions, the running total for the army is currently sitting at £237. As I said, you will have lots of spare archers in that, and 1 spare sister / wild rider, so there are some options for you in what you decide to run. The final list of today's video then is made up of, you guessed it, a level 4 Spellweaver on the lore of Dark Magic, mounted on an Elven Steed, with a Dispel scroll, and the Talisman of Preservation. She is joined by a second level 4 Spellweaver, who is in the lore of Death. She's also mounted on an Elven Steed, and she has the Power Stone and the Obsidian Amulet. Now again, you could swap one or both of the lores on these wizards, but I really think that Dark and Death make for a fantastic combination for Wood Elves, so I would highly recommend at least trying it out for a few games. Back to the list, and in the hero slot, I have that same Glade Captain BSB. He's still got Trueflight arrows and the Howl of Doom arrow, but this time he swapped his enchanted shield for a regular shield and the dragon helm. Into core, and I have 4 units of 10 Glade Guard. All of them have Trueflight arrows, all of them have musicians, and 2 of them also have standards. In special, I have 2 units of 5 Deepwood Scouts, both with Starfire shafts, the same unit of 8 Sisters of the Thorn with full command and the Gleaming Pennant, the same 2 units of Wild Riders with shields, champions, and standards, and I also have 2 units of 5 War Dancers. Finally, in rare, I yet again have those same 2 Great Eagles. Just like with the 2,000 point list over the 1,500 point list, there isn't actually a lot to add in to make this 2,500 points. In fact, there's even less to add in than before. You'll already have more than enough archers from the 2 boxes of Oathmark Light Elf Infantry to make all your core and both units of scouts. You'll already have all the characters and all the cavalry you'll need, and the eagles. All you need to add are those 10 war dancers. As with most things, Games Workshop doesn't produce these anymore, which, on a personal note, I think is a real shame, as, you know, despite their age, I think they were absolutely lovely models, those old war dancers. Anyway, on to what I think you could use for them. Well, I think there are a couple of ways you can do this. The first is to use Witch Elf models, which are still produced by Games Workshop. These are lovely models, and with the right paint job, I think they do make really good war dancers. Now, the second is to use the Wood Elf Blood Bowl team. Now, you get 12 models in this box, and they're all obviously Wood Elves. The only thing is you'll need to give them weapons that you have from other kits, as they don't come with anything in their hands, other than, you know, the odd ball. You do get 30 swords in each of the Oathmark Elves kits that we need for the archers in this list, so you definitely have enough there. You'll just have to do a bit of cutting and pinning and possibly some green stuffing, as all of those swords are held in the right hand, and war dancers need 2 hand weapons each. A box of Witch Elves, though, is £35 for 10 from Games Workshop, or £31.50 from Boards and Swords. And the Blood Bowl team is £26 from Games Workshop, or £23.40 from Boards and Swords. For me, I think the price and the aesthetic of the Blood Bowl team wins my vote, so that's what I'm going to go with for this video. And that's it. That's all you'd need to make the 2,000 point list I went through earlier into this 2,500 point list. So, what would all that come to? Well, assuming you've gone for the Blood Bowl team from Boards and Swords, that will bring the final total to £260.40. Now, I don't think that's too bad, and you do have some options in there for different list builds. You've got 10 spare archers, which you could either use as more Glade Guard, or more scouts, or even more Weight Watchers, although I think there are better models for that, which I'll touch on quickly later. You also have a spare Sister of Thorn / Wild Rider, so you could slightly increase the size of any of those units, or you could add another mounted character to your army. The Wild Rider parts make a great base for a mounted combat character. If you do go with the Blood Bowl team, then you also have 2 spare War Dancers, so you could up both or one of those units if you wanted. A small note of caution is bases. You will need to source these separately, as a lot of the models are supplied with incorrect base sizes or shapes for Warhammer Fantasy. I've found the best Games Workshop equivalent bases are from Tiny Worlds Wargaming. They all come with a slot on the underside of the base to make magnetising them really simple. And they also sell magnets and movement trays, so you can get everything you need in one place. At $3.99 for 20mm square bases, or $14.99 for 120mm square bases, both either with or without slots, they're really good value for money too. And to base all the models you'd need for these 3 armies would cost you just £30.95. So that's a set of 100 20mm square bases for $14.99. Now you only actually need 61, but they only sell them in sets of 20, and it's cheaper to buy 100 than it is to buy 80. But that will give you the spare bases you need to base those extra archers and the extra war dancers. So, you know, not too bad. 1 set of 50mm square bases for the Eagles, and 3 sets of 10 25 by 50mm bases for the cavalry. Now, with the bases, that brings the total for the army up to £291.35. So not bad. Now, this definitely isn't the only way to build and run a competitive Wood Elf list. I think you could also go down the sort of Eternal Guard style list, with a block of, 30 plus Eternal Guard with Shadow Magic, probably the Moonstone of Hidden Ways to jump around forests, and supported by lots of fast moving units or skirmishers. And I think you could also go down the Tree Spirit heavy route with Treekin and Treemen. If you do go down the Tree Spirit route, I'd definitely use the Age of Sigmar Kurnoth Hunters, as I think they make fantastic Treekin. And if you did want to use Waywatchers, I would use one of the only remaining High Elf kits produced by Games Workshop, and that's the Sisters of Avalon. Now, that being said, I think this list is probably the most competitive of the three, and it gives you a great base to work towards either one of those two other types of lists that I've just mentioned. I hope today's snippet has helped you understand what I believe are the best choices for a competitive Wood Elf army, and hopefully it's shown you little ways to save a bit of money too. If you've got any suggestions you think we missed, or if you want to know what we would use for certain units that are no longer available from Games Workshop, head over to any of our socials of Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, or email us directly, all the links for which are below, and we'll do our best to help you out. Join us next time for another instalment in our Buying for Beginners series, where we'll look at one of the other armies of the Warhammer world, or head back to the Night of the Realm Mustering Ground, where you can find links to all of our other exclusive content.
Remember to tag your friends and like, subscribe and share. Then head over to triplecrownwargaming.com and become a Knight of the Realm today.
What are you doing, mate?
Are you alright?
Do it for